Happy New Year! Oh, that was not what the copy was for. Okay. A little bit too early. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. It's a new month. That means a new community toolkit stand up for .NET MAUI. And these days are now kind of crazy for me because I just hopped off the stream where we talked about like community PRs for .NET MAUI. So if that's something that you're interested in, we kind of like, they're unlisted. It's not like for a wide audience. You're very exclusive if you get in there. That's how I try to sell it. So if that's something that you're interested in, we've been doing that for a couple of months now. And then before that, obviously, you have like the .NET MAUI community stand-up, which is all about .NET MAUI. I think they talked about VS Code and the new release, and I think there's a new pre-release with now XAML IntelliSense, which is really cool. XAML Hot Reload, which is now finally in there, so that's super cool. So basically, it's like your one-stop, not an IDE, code editor with all the things you need to have an amazing .NET MAUI experience for development. But enough about that. We're going to talk about the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit, which is much more important and much more cooler than all the other projects out there. Am I right, Brandon?
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Easily. There you go.
I know I'm a little biased, but...
Do you say that for everyone, Gerald?
Yeah, that's right. That's how I start all the streams. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, Brandon, how have you been? You've been busy. I'm going to see you next week in Oslo, which is cool.
That's right. Yeah. Definitely been busy. I was just saying to Sean, I jump on a plane tomorrow to get to Oslo. So can't wait to see you there. And breaking news-ish, I'll be doing a keynote at Tech Bash coming up later this year. And so is Maddie Montequila. So we'll all be there hanging out at Tech Bash in Pennsylvania. Gosh, is that in September, October? Later this year. But it's my first keynote.
Fall for us.
Sweet, that's nice.
Congratulations, Brandon. That's huge news.
Thanks. Now I just have to figure out what I'm going to talk about, and, and it's hard because when you give talks at conferences, you can just talk about whatever you want. So it's like, I'm going to give this talk. If anyone wants to come show up, great. But that's what we're talking about. But with keynotes, I'm thinking about it. It's like, well, everybody's going to be there. And I got to keep everybody interested. So how do I cover everyone? I don't know. We'll figure it out though.
Luckily you've got Maddie there. She's pretty exciting.
Yeah. If the crowd's, not feeling my talk, then I'll just throw the mic at Maddie and let her take over.
You do it. Cool. Vlad, what's been up with you? How's all the crops growing and all the flowers and what have you been doing over there? This is usually a season where you have like all kinds of cool stuff growing and working in the garden, right?
Yeah, hello. So everything is everything is fine. A lot of apricots this year, a lot of strawberry, raspberry, zucchini, potato, tomato, everything is already ready. So you're all invited to help
Yay!
collect it or everything.
That's great. That's so cool. Sean, what have you been up to?
Hello.
But
I don't know.
I'm a bit busy right now with
That's all right, Vlad. I think we have a little bit of a delay here, so that's why things are moving a little bit weird. So sorry, Vlad. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Sean, what have you been up to?
Right, because currently I'm on garden, so I probably have a bad internet connection. Sorry. Yeah.
It's all good.
No worries. I don't really know. It's been a tough day hunting down a bug, but we fixed it at about half an hour before this meeting, so that's all good.
Cool.
And puppy training. So quite exhausting.
That's right.
We are sleeping through the night now, which is fantastic.
You were like, I'm bored. Our kids are finally sleeping through the night. What else can I come up with? Let's get
What
it.
extra challenge? Yep.
At least you can go back for another kid, So that's...
Yeah.
Two's enough of a challenge.
Yeah.
No, you get a kid next.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Kim, you know a little bit about kids, Mr.
I do. Well, that's what's been.
McKitten?
that's,
No, what was it?
I get twins and an older daughter, but yeah, I'm getting used to the fact that school year finishes halfway through the year
Right.
here. I know this is a European thing, right?
Yeah,
Is it an American
mostly.
thing? No.
No, it's the same for us. I don't know about America, but it's the same here. Like, we have 6 weeks like during the summer,
Yeah.
where everything school-wise shuts down, and that's kind of like your break. Like that's when you go over to like the next year, and then everything kind of like starts over. So that's the same
Yeah.
here.
So I got a couple of kids going from primary to
Right.
school, and
Cool.
just dealing with the emotional fallout of that. You
Yep.
know, makes me wish I just had puppies, really.
Yeah.
Or kittens, you know.
The fun of parenting. Otherwise,
Yep.
everything all right?
Otherwise, everything's good. Yeah.
Great.
It's been raining forever in Switzerland, but it stopped now, so that's good.
Actually, I'm also going to. You mentioned Switzerland, the .NET Day in Switzerland, which is like 27th of August, but I think it's like in Zurich, so I think it's still
Is it?
sometime. Yep.
Fantastic.
So
I didn't even
you
know
should
that.
see if you can make it out there. Yep.
Absolutely. I'm
All right.
putting
Cool.
my phone right now.
Yes, do it right now, James, Mr. Media Element.
Good afternoon, Gerald.
Hey,
I
how
am
are
doing
you?
well. I'm enjoying the weather here in Surrey, British Columbia. It has actually been very interesting weather. We have not had that much rain, and I live in the middle of a torrential rainforest, so it's been kind of sweet.
Perfect. Sounds like lovely. No rain is good weather in my book, so anything else I can kind of like cope with. That's great. Yeah, we got a lot of exciting stuff just looking at the agenda right here because we have upcoming releases. That's usually the case. I don't know. We kind of like grew into this pattern of like we talk about stuff and then we're like, should we release this? Yeah, let's just release it. And we're just like this close to just doing it live on stream. But let's not go that far. But usually we do it kind of like the day after we scrape together all the things that we want to release and then boom, there we are. So upcoming releases is like .NET MAUI 9.0.1.0.1. I don't know, depending on where you are in the world. People call it differently. Which kind of like probably looking at the version number is going to be a couple of bug fixes, but we'll probably see a little bit about that later. Then we have the brand new, much more exciting community toolkit.maui.camera, which is really cool. I think we've talked about that before. We've talked about it many times before, probably, because this was a concept in the Examiner Community Toolkit where, it worked-ish. It wasn't super stable, and we would love to have it, but these APIs are super complicated for whatever reason on the actual platforms, probably because you have so many options on it and the APIs are not always great. But we got help from I kind of like a community company hybrid. I think we talked about this. Actually, the company is called Esri, which is pretty big, which has a couple of nice employees. And they were like, we need this camera view. We're also fans of the community toolkit. Our way of contributing back is like, hey, writing this code for the camera view, donating it back to you, and then we get to use it in the form of this plugin, but then also everyone else gets to use it, right? So that's really great. We've been able to create this kind of like a basic version, but the basic version already does a lot, but kind of like really get the basics in and make sure that they are, solid, that they work. And we've been iterating over it and we've been testing it pretty well. So I'm confident that this is actually a great version that you will love. So we're getting that out there so that you can test it as well. And then from there, hopefully we can start adding new features. Right now, we kind of like have the core features of like showing the little camera view, obviously, taking a picture, doing the zoom, doing the flash, yes or no, kind of like, the core concepts of having a camera view in there. And then from there, the sky's the limit, right? We have all kinds of wild plans because you can do amazing stuff with cameras. We'll have to see if it all works out, but we're going to do our best. So that is coming for you. And then we have the media element, which is also a lot of exciting stuff is happening there. I think we're going to talk about that. Let's just actually just yes, like we have a proposal. So let's just go over into the proposal and all the things here. One of the things Yes, lock screens are too. Okay, so let's just hop over to all the issues and things right here because we're going to talk a lot about the media element. First, kind of like proposal, Victor couldn't join us, unfortunately. So, Brandon, subtitle support for the media element, which sounds great.
Yeah, and actually, I'll lean on James since we're lucky enough to have you join us today. Thank you again. Actually, before we even get into this, because I'm going to skip way ahead. This will just be the James show today because we just merged this awesome PR adding lock screen controls. And if I can get this to work, I actually wanted to show it off since this is
Live
hot
demos.
off the presses.
Oh,
I know, right?
goodness.
Let's see what
You
this
like to
looks
live on the
like.
edge.
Ooh, okay, that actually looks pretty good.
Wow.
Cool. So this is our sample app, the Community Toolkit sample app. And what James just did is add something super, super cool. So right now we're streaming a video. And if you go and look at your Android lock screen, we now have lock screen controls. This is a custom image that James added to the toolkit. So super cool. You can obviously put whatever image you want. We can go ahead and we can fast forward a little bit. And if we go back to the video,
I will mention that on a physical device, it will show the actual time codes. So it'll show like at what point, like at the bottom there where it just shows the bar, it will show the time codes on a physical device.
I love it. James, this is so cool. I don't have really any other words.
All the different APIs were fun to do, and it will slightly show differently on lower APIs because I have more controls. And once we add the new Media 3 APIs, there's a lot more I can do.
No way. Oh, that's awesome. Here, let me bring the PR back up so you can talk about all the goodies in it. Let's see. There we go. So, yeah, what else do we get in this, James? And also, I mean, thank you for all your hard work, and Victor too.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate the help you provided yourself, because without you and without Sean, this would have been a lot harder to do because there would have been a lot more bugs. But the main thing I want to mention is...
There still might be bugs. Let's not
Oh, yeah, I know, but you both helped tremendously in terms of fixing issues that were easily avoidable. But I will go on to state that with the media element, one of the main things is it adds background support for basically all of the devices for when you're actually playing media. So if you're actually in Android or Windows, well, it doesn't really apply to Windows because it doesn't really matter, but for Windows, iOS, and Mac, when you're playing media, it will, well, at least with Android, it will start a service, and that service will allow background play so that the media controls will always work. Also, another thing, the Bluetooth support has been added for Android. I'm not sure how much of it was already there for iOS, but if you get an incoming phone call and you're playing Media Element, it will no longer continue to play really loudly in the background. It will automatically pause. And when you switch to your call, it'll go, hey, like it'll just mute and pause. And when you stop the call, depending on what API and what device you're using, it will either resume playback or just do nothing. But you still have the option to just swipe down the menu and click play. Also, there's a lot of stuff done in the background support, like you can add the title, the metadata artist, and you can do things like add background artwork for the media player element itself for the notifications. That right now only currently supports URLs. I could have added support for local files or embedded elements, but that would require extensive work in the background that I do intend to do later. But at this point, it was just simply to add the feature, and it was strongly suggested that I not overdo
it. You mean this? How big was this PR this time, James? Let's see.
I think it's over 1,000K. And 900 of that K was probably Android 26 to 29 or 26 to 30.
Boom! Look at that. 1,000 lines, and nobody can see it because I messed up. Where is it?
Oh, there you
There
go.
we
You
are.
got it.
Yeah, 1,000-line PR. James, absolutely incredible. And I do want to bring up the docs real quick. I know we can spend all day showing off this one, but I do want to highlight a couple things. Let's see. Here in the docs, which again, thank you for putting the docs together. This is all James all day. But what I want to highlight is when you add this, we've updated the docs, or rather James has updated the docs to include everything that you have to add for Android, iOS. There's a couple extra things you'll want to add to get everything working. So like your Android manifest will have to add information about the service and filters and all this fun stuff. So it'll be all there in the docs. And actually, Gerald, should we... Oh, I don't have control of the docs anymore. Cause I was going to say we should probably bump this up from draft to ready to review.
Yeah, so we actually had a little... Yep. So we had a little discussion on that on our Discord. The way we kind of like go about this right now is that I keep them on draft because I had a couple of instances where it was like, oh, this looks great, let's merge it. And then people were like, whoa, this is not even released yet, and now the docs are so then I had to revert it and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of like my safeguard, because if it's in draft, you cannot be like, hey, I'm just going to merge it. But yeah, then also kind of like it's kind of like ambiguous, like, is this still in draft or is this ready for review? Has it been reviewed yet? So yeah, we kind of like maybe want to think about that a little bit more, how we actually do that. But it's in draft right now. I think Sean has actually looked at it yet.
Did the audio cut out for Gerald? For anybody else?
Sounds
Yeah,
like
a little
he's
bit.
for a swim underwater.
Yeah.
Hello. Am I back? No.
You're back.
I will say, Gerald,
Yeah,
the way, I mean, this is very selfish, and Sean, feel free to push back, but yeah, kind of the way I look at it is if Sean's reviewed the docs PR and it says Sean's approved it, then that's good enough for me.
Maybe
Yeah, no,
have
sure.
a label for it if we can, saying it's not active yet, or put a do not merge yet until release.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you can actually, like, I don't know if that I didn't check it, but Sean, that was my kind of my question at the end before I apparently cut out. But Sean, can you and maybe Brandon, I think kind of like people can review even if you're not have write access, right? So if you go there, you can kind of like leave a review, so you can still kind of like say, hey, I approve it, and we will kind of like see. Well, I don't know. We have to think on it maybe a little bit more. Definitely, like usually I just trust Sean, but the one reason it's in draft and I don't merge it is because if I merge it, it will automatically push it live. And then we have the situation where the docs are there. People might stumble on it in the short amount of time that we, take to release the actual bits. And people will be like, oh, I see this, but it's not there yet. What's going on? Opening an issue, lots of fuss around it, lost time, while that isn't really necessary. So typically what I do, because I am also, the one that's releasing the bits, I will just, start the release. And then whenever I know that there are no build errors and stuff, it's on NuGet, then I go over to the docs and I'm like, I usually ping Sean around that time with like, hey, have you looked over this? Does it look all right? Yes, it does. I give it a quick glance too. And then I merge those, and then everything will be in line and in sync and blah, blah. But I'm very much the single point of failure in that whole process. So we probably should come up with something. I think, I haven't told him, but I think actually Sean has the rights to actually merge things on that repository for the docs as well. But then he will go crazy with all the power that he now has. So nobody tell him.
Unless that's changed recently, I certainly didn't.
Oh, okay. Well,
grayed out.
we can figure it out.
That's right.
So
there is
anyway.
a ready to merge label we could use.
Oh, perfect. So
I've just applied that to the metadata
Yep.
one.
perfect. We'll talk about that a little bit more and make it better. Perfect. So yeah, I guess this isn't merged yet. No, this was the proposal that we were going to talk about, but the lock screen stuff is merged. That's going to be in our next release,
Yeah, and actually, I think
probably tomorrow.
just to wrap this one up, or wrap up the lock screen conversation. So I put here, we could push out Media Element as V2 v3.2.0, or, I mean, this is a pretty cool feature. We could also bump it up to 4.0, but there's no breaking changes. It'd just be more like, hey, this is really cool. This is a 1,000-line PR. This is a big deal. Everybody get excited about it, 4.0.
We are adding a service which does change the default behavior, at least in Android.
4.0 it is then. Nice. All right.
Boom. Decided.
Cool. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so that's going to be in there. Then for 4.1 or 5, whatever it's going to be, we're going to look at subtitle support, which is really amazing.
Yeah. So sorry to derail the entire agenda, but yeah, James, tell us about subtitle support.
Yes, I was looking into subtitle support over the last year and spent some time on it, and I realized that each of the devices, except for iOS and Mac, actually had built-in support, but none of them supported the same sort of subtitles at all. Like, they supported different varying formats, and they really didn't offer much specifically other than the most basic features. As in, they physically would allow you to display subtitles that were physically perfect, but at varying formats, and iOS had no support. So I went and wrote a parser for 2 different formats, VTT and SRT. And no, I didn't write them. I went to OpenAI, had them write it, had the bot write it, and then I rewrote like 99% of the code to actually make it compliant with something that wouldn't make Gerald, Sean, and Brandon go, no, please don't ever put that in writing. So I fixed it all up, and then I added it as a label, as a device-specific label to each device using time codes. And I spent the last month or so playing with it to make it look pretty, and it works well. I will mention that it still does need a little bit of work. It needs to be specifically the feature that was requested, which was font size, is done. Font type, like, getting the fonts, I have to learn a little more about fonts and how they work with MAUI and device specific. But once that's done, it'll be ready for people to look at and start figuring out where all my bugs are.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty speechless right now. Sounds like you've already done a ton of work. I assume Victor's been working with you on it. Is that right?
Not yet. No, he's been very busy the last couple of months with work and family, and that's mostly been done on my own. So he's happy to work with me again starting in July. I was actually going to plan on spending most of June working on the bugs that are currently existing in Media Element, and maybe dabbling a bit more and jumping into some of those other significant long list of bugs that we have.
Gotcha. Well, I think, let's see. What does everybody think about doing something like this? Because it is a proposal, so we'll have to vote on it, but to vote on it, it has to be championed. Is it fair to assign Victor as the champion?
I talked to him this morning. He's agreeable to it.
Awesome. Victor, you're amazing. You don't even have to show up and you're getting work done. All right, so let's do...
We can assign everything to him now. I was like, yep, I talked to him this morning. He's fine with it.
Oh, yeah. Way to go, Victor. Let's see. VH. There he is.
Is that Victor? Any objections? Oh, okay. It's fine.
All right. Well, that being said, I think we could kick it to a vote unless anybody's got some more questions for James. I see actually some cool Matt Leibowitz in the chat asking about using a controlled template and asking about, or for the control template, saying people can style them, maybe some accessibility for the text. I don't know if we want to go that deep in this first PR, or that could certainly be...
I'd be happy to do it on the second one, but just simply getting it working at all was actually rather challenging. And just the whole idea of using a label to center text on a device, regardless of orientation, within the bounds on multiple different, like, depending on, like, because you got to remember, the text has to be centered regardless of what the developer does with the rest of the program. So it has to be relative to the actual window itself. Or actually, the media element itself, not anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good point. Well, at least for pushing this forward. Any other questions before we vote for approval?
Just out of interest. So are we rendering the subtitles ourselves? Is that you are rendering the subtitles in the app? How does that work when you switch to full screen in something like iOS? Because that's not
iOS. Yes, it just I hooked the full screen events. I created full screen events and hooked them so that when you go to full screen, it just simply removes it from the previous layer and puts it on the new layer.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the video of it. It's a little small here, but let's see if I can cue this up better. There we go. So subtitles goes full screen, and then I see him at the bottom now.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this built in for iOS, or sorry, I kind of like.
There's no support at all for iOS outside of using M3U8 files. So this was all done by me, customized. I basically used a UI, a text element, and just positioned it on the page and did it based on time codes. For an example, I used Gerald's video. I created an SRT and a VTT file and put them in with time codes, and then just figured out how to do it.
Cool. Yeah, the one thing, but this is, we probably should talk about this in the PR. The one thing which might be hard, like it's all the way down at the bottom now. I think it would be cooler if it's like in the video frame, but that might be hard to detect. So I guess this is then. I mean, it's super cool. Don't get me wrong. I don't know. Maybe it's just we'll have to look at it. But yeah, definitely, like in terms of voting, I'm all for this. This is super cool.
And Pedro was saying, be done the way, and says plug in or plug out. I don't know if Pedro, if that means opt in or opt out, or what you're thinking there. But certainly, James, this is something that the developer would have to provide the subtitles to opt into.
Yes, with no subtitles, it just defaults to normal behavior.
Okay. And it looks like even in your demo, I see. We'll bring up all the screens again. There we go. I see, at least on this iPad, it looks like you click on the video and say load subtitles.
No, what I did is for the purpose of demonstration, I simply added them as like you go media element subtitle URL, and it puts it in there, and it auto detects what type of subtitles you have, and then uses the correct parser for it. So
Got it.
Basically, I didn't want to modify the existing sample, so I added another element to the list of sources just to demonstrate it for the purposes of not messing with, because it can be added either in XAML or in code behind. And I just wanted, like I did for the other examples I've done in the past, to just simply add to the list, because it doesn't make sense to mess with the original code, because we want to demonstrate the basic features, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think sounds like for now, if subtitles is, I'll just say null or not existent, then they won't show up. But if they are
Correct.
provided, they will show up. And that could be the way that the developers allow folks to toggle subtitles on and off. Because, certainly, like if I'm watching a video and I want to turn off subtitles, then for the developer implementing this, they would just have to go in and set subtitles back to null. And then if I turn it back on, reassign the subtitle property. Is that kind of how it's working?
Well, right now it's done at when you change the source, but it would be very easy to implement and just add toggle on off and will just instantly disappear or reappear. That would be instantly easy to toggle, and I'll just add that as
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And then following with Pedro, interfaces, of course. That makes more sense. Thanks, Pedro. So if devs want to implement their own implementation, so yeah, maybe.
Yeah, feel free to get a hold of me, Pedro, and tell me a little bit more about what your idea is and how you would like that implemented, and I'll look into that.
Cool. And yeah, Matt too. Matt mentioned control templates. I think, Matt, if I'm being honest, you probably know control templates better than anybody else in the entire world.
And I'm
yeah,
doing
feel
that
free
blank
to-
faced look when you mention control templates, so I'll have to look into that too.
So yeah, I'd say everybody come join in. It sounds like, James, you've got a PR kind of queued up already that you could open up
Yeah.
a draft after the stand-up today. So yeah, let's everybody jump in, check it out. Matt, Pedro, if you have the time to look at it, that'd be amazing. And then you kind of could point to things in code to specifically say like, oh yeah, we could change this to be like this, and then devs could do this. And it sounds like this will be something really, really cool feature, and maybe it'll grow in version 2, or maybe we'll be able to make everything work in version 1. But I love it. James, you've been doing incredible work. We've already been talking about Media Element for 30 minutes, so let's do a quick vote. Show of hands for everyone who approves moving forward with subtitles on Media Element.
Oh yeah.
2 votes from Gerald, Sean. Vlad's on the moon right now, but when he hears it, I'm sure he'll raise his hand. That's
It'll be a good
There it is.
Hey.
All right, awesome. So we'll go ahead and we'll bump this to approved, and we are ready to launch. We are ready to move forward with this. Thank you so much, James, and thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to jump in.
Yeah, this has actually been kind of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I'm
like,
also
and
involved
then
in this
move on.
one too.
We've got another James proposal.
Not my proposal, somebody else's, but I helped with it.
Or another Media Element proposal.
And I've also done all the work for this too.
My goodness. Well, what's this one all about, James? And can we also assign this to Victor?
right now, transparencies and things like that just don't work with Media Element on Android. And they wanted to add, somebody's been talking about it for a couple of months, of adding texture view in multiple different feature requests. And I figured, well, let's see how complicated this is. And ultimately, to simply add it on your own, it's like 3 lines. So I went and started developing it, realized it was a little more than 3 lines, and it's actually not that hard to add. And it does support like transparencies on the controls and also on the Media Element itself. And it allows you to do a lot more than that. If you scroll down the PR there, it actually lists specifically what sort of things it supports. We don't want a default to texture view. That won't work because Google has not quite deprecated it, but they specifically switched to surface view because it has better support, and it's their main, like, you don't use texture view unless you have a specific reason to use it. Like things like if you want to overlay multiple media elements on top of each other, which is kind of a niche issue. But there are also visual elements that can be manipulated more easily if you use texture view. But it will be more intensive on the CPU and not use less of the GPU when you're using texture view. And the way I set it up currently is if you switch sources and you select texture view, it will switch to texture view. If you select nothing, it will just use the default behavior that we've always had. And it also opens up several options. If you look at the, you scroll down there, there's a proposed API. Let's
Tell me
see.
when to stop scrolling.
Oh, keep scrolling.
Okay.
It's way down at the bottom. I put together a proposed API. It should be like all the way down. Go up a bit. Should be up there somewhere.
Just tell me when. Right here? No.
Up. There we go. So this is just a rough idea, and I have Android Surface. The defaults to Surface, and I have foreground and background. So basically, it's just going to be foreground and background. And right now, the biggest discussion in the entire proposal is what we label the background and the foreground, which to me says that's kind of a good thing because we're not arguing about the basic how it works. We're arguing about the naming, which is very hard. The hard part's the naming. And, we can do things like we can set the background color for both the controls and for the media element itself. Like things like transparency, we can now set for both of those things. And there are certain things we can't do because it's just beyond the pale or complicated. But there are a lot of things we can do. Like we can set the alpha specifically. Like we can set, ARGB values. I separated the alpha and the RGB just because depending on the device, it behaves differently. Sorry, no, this is specifically for actual player, yeah. But sorry, depending on the surface type, you can set the RGB, but not the alpha if you're not using texture view. So you can still set the background color for both the player and the controls, but if you use texture view, you can add the alpha.
Cool. And James, does this work on every platform, or is this
well?
Android
This
specific?
this was specifically requested for media for Android. I haven't actually done any development on the other platforms. It's probably just as easy, but there's been no complaint about those platforms' behavior.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean,
the thing is I can't add texture view to those other devices because it's explicitly an Android platform element.
right. Yeah. I mean, again, love it. But I think a couple thoughts is maybe we pause this so you can work on the proposal we just approved for you. But also, yeah, I think it might be best to look into other platforms ahead of time. Just because if we add platform-specific things, it can make both the implementation on our side and also the consumption on the developer side using it harder, because you'll have to do platform-specific stuff and things can get a little messy. So,
I'll look into that and see if I can implement it for all the devices. And if we can, I'll get back to you guys at another month and we can look into going further.
Cool. Love it. All right. I think for now, I'll put the, again, I forget. Nobody else can see my monitor when I don't share my screen. I'll tell you, I'll put the needs discussion label back on here so we can talk about it next month as well. And yeah, we'll see how far we get with the subtitle one. That way we don't have too many balls in the air, and especially when you have multiple pull requests open for the same feature, then things get messy with merge conflicts. So yeah, why don't we just streamline everything? We'll do things in kind of single focus, and then we can circle back to this one. But yeah, I mean, that also sounds really cool. Having background colors and be able to adjust the opacity of media element. It's becoming like a real thing. like something you would pay money for. This is incredible, James. Thank you.
Really cool. Then more media element, but a little bit less related to cool features. It seems mismatch on Xamarin Android dependencies for media element. So
I've seen this a few times when I was playing around with adding subtitle or adding the support to the thing I just added, the lock screen. That happens a lot depending. I spend a lot of time writing in specific you can't, sometimes that's an issue with using statements where you'll have the same element in multiple different packages. and you have to write out specifically the targeted item on the line and not use a using statement. So that could be any single line of code, and you don't know until you compile if that's an issue.
Right.
Well, scrolling down here, and the reason I wanted to chat about it today is it
Wait.
sounds like it might not
Eight-
be a problem in our library.
8 minutes ago, he said it's resolved. Let's close it. 9 minutes ago.
Everybody cool?
That's
I know,
amazing.
Sean, you've had some discussion on this.
No, I don't know. I don't know the exact details on what he's about to say, but I've seen some weirdness with this.
So
There's
kinda-
issues with the same library showing up in multiple different versions of our current libraries. It's not so much an issue if you know what you're doing, or say Excel player. As an example, there are multiple libraries with the exact same named items, and if you call it in just as a general rule, if you call it a specific element in a class, or you call it a specific class, it's gonna not allow you to do that, and it's gonna fail to compile because it won't know which one to call. And that happened specifically in multiple different libraries when I was setting this up.
All right. Pedro also confirms it can be closed. That's confirmation from the user Obedit. Pedro. All right, I'm in. Boom. All right, let's keep rolling.
Fixed. Sort of.
Didn't mean to turn this into the media element show today, but thank you everybody. Because this one's going to be another big topic. Boom, camera view.
Yeah.
Woo.
So I already talked about that a little bit and what to expect here, but I guess we have the APIs handy here. I think you might have like the latest on this. Are we ready to merge this? Is there still outstanding things?
Yeah, I spent a ton of time on this because again, another big one. 3,000, almost 3,500 lines of code here, and I think it's ready, but I do want to bring up update. Why not? So let's start with, let's see, Pedro's review. Pedro brought up a couple good things that I wanted to at least highlight before we push it through. Let's see if I can. Yeah, so one of them. Let's see if we can make this font size work. Oh, no, now I lost my spot. Okay, so there's a couple things going on here, and one of the things is to initialize camera view requires some asynchronous operations on Android and Windows. iOS can do it synchronously, but Android and Windows, we need to do some async await. And in one of them, Pedro pointed out that the way we have implemented Android, or the way Android implements itself or requires us to do the implementation. There we go. The way that Android requires us to do the implementation is basically by kicking off something in the background, waiting for it to finish, but it's not async await. It's that event-based system where we now have to pass it a task completion source, and then wait on that to finish, and there could be a deadlock. So what Pedro pointed out is if something goes wrong, the app will just deadlock. And I did go ahead and implement, we'll say this is a bit of a workaround, but I went through and I looked at any place where we call that method. So anywhere we're calling connect camera, to make sure we pass in a cancellation token source. And right now I'm saying 3 seconds. That's a very just made up random number, but in my mind, I figured if it didn't finish in 3 seconds, then the user's going to be wondering why the app froze for that long. Anyways, so the good news is in our code, in our implementation, if you use camera view out of the box, that deadlock won't happen. It'll time out after 3 seconds. But Pedro's point, and totally valid, is that it is a public method. So anybody can also call connect camera themselves. And if they don't pass in a cancellation token, then they might hit that deadlock. So he's totally right. Pedro, I know you're here. Thank you. I agree with you, but kind of in the spirit of let's push out V1 because I agree with Pedro. Somebody could shoot themselves in the foot by kind of introducing that deadlock on themselves by not passing in a cancellation token source. Our library, if you just kind of use it out of the box, will be fine. But Pedro's recommendation was to set our own internal timeout on these Android callbacks that they'll always time out after a certain time. And I guess my big concern there is I don't know what the timer should be. Like I said, like I just kind of made up 3 seconds here. I don't even know if this is long enough or short enough. So I'm kind of hesitant to say that these methods will always time out after a certain period of time. And I'm kind of thinking we push it out and see if are folks even going to call this method themselves? Are the developers smart enough, wise enough to figure out that the deadlock's caused because they didn't pass in a cancellation token themselves? So this is one thing I wanted to pause, make sure I chatted with everybody first to make sure like I'm not going crazy. I'm not missing anything. We're not going to sabotage anything for users before we merge this. What do you guys think?
I mean, if we're going to run with a timeout, it sounds like that could fit in with the options when we allow developers to register things. So they could change the timeout if they wanted to.
Well, I will say this timeout right here, this is in the handler. Like this is
Sorry. I mean, if we did have a kind of internal timeout,
if
you put it in the connect, you could allow the developers the users of the system to find one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Pedro even says they could also override connect handler, which, yep, totally valid. I guess probably the biggest question here, and I know I'm very biased. I've spent a lot of hours on Cam Review this past week, and it's a big PR. I guess the big question is, can we merge this, or is this okay to merge now? And then can we kind of figure out some of this later? Because, yep, Pedro's totally right. You can override connect handler. You could call connect camera yourself. But I think those will be more edge cases that probably would be better to let people try out. And when they hit a bug, open the issue, and we could actually work with them to be like, okay, well, why are you overriding the handler? How's a better way that we can implement it? You know what I mean? Kind of use that real world implementation instead of us just sitting back guessing like, well, if they do this, then they might do this and they might do this. We could kind of wait for a real world implementation. Oh, well, Pedro says, yeah, it's cool to merge it and change it when something blows up. Okay, I mean,
I think merging it gives a lot more people a piece of functionality that they're asking for, and like you say, I think it is going to be an edge case where people are going to fall into this. So I'd say it's fine for a V1.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my idea too.
The other concern that was raised, and this is hot off the presses just 3 hours ago by the original author. So Jitao, thank you if you're watching. Thanks for all your hard work putting this together. But he mentioned right now, so camera provider is an internal class. Should we make this public before we release it? The only downside there is we'll want to add some unit tests around camera provider since it'll be a public API. Camera switcher, some of the original debug text are missing in the sample. I know what he's talking about. I ripped it out of pure laziness. So Zita, I apologize. That one's me. I had to refactor some of the async await stuff, and it wasn't. Some of the information about the available cameras isn't ready. As soon as you new up camera view, you have to await some things. So it was causing some crashing on the sample app, and instead of just actually properly implementing it, I was like, I'm just going to pull this out for now because I can't afford another couple hours only on the sample. So I think we could polish up the sample a little bit. I agree. I don't think that's a blocker. And then update camera info sounds like can be removed. So maybe we should remove that before moving forward. But yeah, I think that's probably it. We'll promote camera provider to public, write some unit tests around it to keep some guardrails there, and then remove this method in camera manager.windows.cs. And then I think we're good. I guess the only question I have is, does anybody have the time to do that before we do a release tomorrow? I mean, we could always delay the release, but we are super, super close. I don't have the time tonight before Gerald will push it out while I'm sleeping. But yeah, if anybody's available to do promote camera provider to public and then unit tests, I mean, you could just tell ChatGPT to do it. I've been doing that for unit tests for months now. But yeah, if anybody is able to volunteer for that, then I think we're cool with merging camera view after that's done, and we could push out V1 tomorrow morning.
I'll happily take 0.1. I don't have a working Windows installation, so I could do 3, but it would be blind testing. I just assume that the pipeline will build and everything's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And if update camera info is a private method, then
it should be safe to just
blow it away, see what happens. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. See if you can make that happen. If not, we can push it out for like another week or something.
If you need somebody to test, just load it in Windows and see if it works. I can do that for you.
That's cool. Thank you, James.
Yeah,
so let's see if we can make it work. If not, because because it's like a bigger feature, has new dependencies, it's going to be a separate package, so we can release all the rest without this one and then do that separately like a week later or a day later or whatever we decide to do. So let's see if we can get to it, or else we shouldn't rush it and then make mistakes or whatnot. So let's see. I'll see tomorrow when I wake up what the status is.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Well, get excited, everybody. Camera view is finally coming to the toolkit. Okay.
Touch behavior for collection view, also a very interesting one. Oh, this is a PR by. Okay, interesting.
So I'll kick this off with some thoughts, although I've done nothing on this PR. But just to give some background, when we first released touch behavior, we did not automatically assign touch behavior's binding context. And to zoom way out, .NET MAUI, behaviors in .NET MAUI do not automatically assume the binding context of their parent or the attached element, view, whatever that is. Whatever you attach it to, it doesn't automatically assume the binding context of that. And that's a breaking change between Xamarin Forms and .NET MAUI, where on Xamarin Forms, well, actually, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think that did happen, which is why we've gotten so many bugs opened up where we've just had to be like, yeah, well, you just have to assign the binding context. But then in 8.0.1, after, I forget who, somebody pointed out, like, hey, actually, we are assigning the binding context for all of the other behaviors in the toolkit. Kind of makes sense we do that for touch behavior too. Pedro went ahead and took a stab at it, and it's been, we'll say, baffling the smartest minds in the world over how we do this, because it's not easy. So huge conversation here, huge conversation here about how we go about this. And I think it's a really challenging problem to solve. But Sean, since you're here, Pedro, since you're also here, curious if we wanted to chat about it now, if you have some thoughts, or have we cracked this, have we solved this problem, or is this something that is just, maybe we just put in the docs that is a special way to handle collection view?
Yeah, it gets a bit messy in a collection view when the things being attached to are recycled, and therefore then if you want to inherit the data context of the new view, not the old view, we had to reapply the binding, which I think Pedro's initial fix was to remove the check for whether the binding was already set or not. The problem comes then is that if a developer manually sets that, it gets overridden by our code. So that's what this initial issue was reporting.
Yeah, and that's that's a funny thing. Like, so yeah, the way we implemented all the binding behavior for bindings on all the behaviors is that if you've already set the behaviors binding, we won't change it. So this is only if the developer hasn't set it. And yeah, Pedro's initial fix totally works, but yeah, it would always override the developer's manually set binding context. And it's like, oh, that feels worse. So how do we solve it?
Yeah, I mean, I've written some code that solves this specific problem. Whether it's the most elegant or not, I'm not sure. It involves having to check whether we're inside of a collection view and then allowing the reassignment of the binding context in that scenario. Now, as Pedro's pointed out, there are other views that would allow virtualization. So there would be a number of other use cases to support. Or we don't do it and just we're not applying it.
Yeah, I feel like that's my biggest concern, Sean, is that I think if I had a time machine, I would go back in time and have never touched the binding context for any of our behaviors and just, hey, it's a .NET MAUI thing. You got to manually assign the binding context. Here's how we recommend to do it, which I guess we could. That would be a breaking change, a big one for every behavior in the toolkit. But yeah, I think that's my concern too, is like you were saying, Sean, is the kind of that scope creep is, okay, so we fix this for collection view, but then yeah, there's also other virtualization, there's item views, there's item templates, and this could really grow. So actually, hey, there's a suggestion from Pedro. Should inherit binding context, and then we could work around that. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways to go about this. But yeah, kind of the engineer in me says we haven't really stumbled upon the best way to do it, the proper way to do it. But we're kind of in this we're in this sticky situation where we've already committed to setting the binding context for all of the behaviors in the toolkit. And so it'd be a big breaking change if we stop doing that. But then if we continue to do these one-offs, we could probably spend the rest of our careers fixing small bugs like this. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of bring it up to see if what everybody's thoughts are, if maybe there's just something we're missing, or, you know, we've got really smart people here, including James live, but along with, you know, Matthew in the chat and Alan, George. Maybe there's things we just haven't thought of or clever ways to implement this. But I don't know. I think at least we could add something in the docs that recommends a way to do it and handle it that way. But yeah, I don't know if there's a great way to fix this to make everybody happy. You know what I mean?
I don't know if it's possible. I'd like to have a play with Pedro's idea of this should inherit binding context property. Whether we can default it to true or default it to false and somehow determine switch, basically, if we've detected at the point of it being attached whether the binding context was previously set as well as this, you know what I mean, use the two in combination to determine whether we can
should inherit binding context seems like a good idea to me, because sorry, that fixes a lot of issues with you know, like if it's an issue, they can just turn it off and do it all manually.
I think one thing we should keep in mind is what would developers like? What's the expectation when they consume our behaviors? And as .NET MAUI continues to grow and live on, and more developers figure out that in MAUI you have to assign the binding context for your behavior manually, and then they find the toolkit, what are their expectations? Like, will that expectation change, I guess, in the future? You know what I mean? Because we're literally just talking about our toolkit behaviors, but if you think about all the other behaviors in the world that .NET MAUI developers will be doing or implementing, making themselves, using in their apps, they're going to eventually get used to it, and it'll be the default expectation for them to assign the binding context themselves. So I don't know. And then, yeah, if we have should inherit binding context, is that intuitive? Do we just make things more complicated by checking that? And if it's a collection view and the default behavior for collection view is should inherit binding context is now false, I don't know. It can get messy real quick. So
What is the default behavior currently for MAUI? Maybe we inherit that.
The default behavior is MAUI does not automatically assign a behavior's binding context. So we've already broken that.
Okay, that's one of the issues. Okay.
Yeah.
What if we actually just revert that decision?
I think it'd be a big break, but I think that's probably the best path forward in terms of just maintainability for us, because we're going to constantly be chasing this behavior binding context thing for the rest of the toolkit's life. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, and I didn't expect us to figure out an answer now, but I think we've got some options here, and certainly anybody who's hanging out with us today watching the video, yeah, chime in. Like I said, if there's a lot more smarter people out there, Alan Ritchie, Matt Leibowitz, if you got ideas, maybe something we haven't thought of before that maybe is a little bit deeper into how the guts of MAUI works that we could take advantage of since we have access to internals for the toolkit. Maybe there's something there, but yeah, I'm kind of with you, Sean, is maybe in a year or .NET 9, maybe like .NET 10, .NET MAUI developers would be ready for that break, but it'd be something we definitely have to vocalize and put a lot of work into, and blog posts, let people know.
I'm wondering actually if we could. Can you write analyzers for XAML that would highlight, would basically report a warning if they haven't set the binding context, and they have set the binding?
Yeah, that would definitely be the best way to go about it. Certainly, it'd
be the most obvious for the developer, wouldn't it?
We could break and provide you a warning now in your code, so that
we'll royally break your code.
So, anyways, I think sleep on it. I don't think this is something that we want to certainly rush, and certainly, I mean, just being a part of this discussion, I don't think there's any way we can make everybody happy with one solution. And I can definitely see a world where maybe .NET 10, we just rip off that Band-Aid, we revert that automatically assigning binding context change. Or maybe that's where we do implement should inherit binding context, make the break. We could keep the logic in there. A workaround for existing users could be to set that to true, because it'll be false by default. And then all their code works as it normally did. Or, Sean, I love the idea of an analyzer, although I'm not going to volunteer to do that because analyzers are really hard. But yeah, it's something that there's just no easy path forward for all this stuff. So I see we're over time. I don't want to spend too much on this, but certainly want to highlight it in case somebody out there smarter than me can crack this nut. Well, hey, look at that. Speaking of Sean and touch behavior. What is going on with this one, Sean? I'll scroll all the way down because...
Okay, so I mean, I guess the previous issue comes from the fact that people are migrating from Xamarin Forms-based apps to MAUI-based apps. And we used to have a touch effect, and that certainly brought in the binding context. and I don't know if the shift behaviors then lost that functionality. But basically, people have been suggesting that the syntax is now quite verbose in terms of trying to use a touch behavior over what was the touch effect. So this, is it a discussion? Yes, a discussion. I put a suggestion to the author, and he got to the point, or they got to the point of being able to write code that was fairly similar. So they basically exposed our touch behavior via an attached property, and then it automatically attaches it to the element. So the syntax looks very similar to what was touch effect. My question was going to be, is that something we would want to roll into the toolkit itself? Or are we happy with it is the way that it is? It gets a little bit more complicated. There's a lot more property. You have to write a load of attached properties and then deal with updating the behavior that's attached to the element.
Yeah, so
But the code is there pretty much.
like this is how it would look then?
Yes.
So, okay, so, oh, I see. So grid, and then you add this tap behavior.
Mm.
Interesting.
That's how it was implemented, exposed in the Xamarin Community Toolkit.
And do you also have to attach the behavior to the grid, or is there
no the code
happening automatically?
Code, yeah, our code would attach it.
Ooh.
In there somewhere, which is a bit of magic. I do appreciate.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one makes me a little nervous. If we're attaching behaviors to elements now, that could also get real messy and lead us down a similar rabbit hole. Actually, it's a cool idea though. I mean, I do like how that looks. Although...
Yeah, I mean this is actually, I think I've discovered this is the only way you can attach behaviors via a style as well, because the behaviors property is not settable. So in a style you can't define behaviors that go on, but if you use this approach, you can put that in a style.
Oh wow! Behavior attached to a style.
So for every button that you add, or every grid that you add to your application.
This is really cool. I will say I'm super hesitant given just the last conversation we had, because I can see how, because again, this is something really cool. It'll make developers' lives easier. And then, yeah, like that next question comes up is like, well, what if I want to attach a different behavior? Or what if I want to remove that behavior? Or, hey, I didn't know you were attaching a behavior to my control. I could see that opening a whole nother can of worms, but I would say, if Ulrich or Jean, if you want to run with this and maybe put out a NuGet package, just share it with the world, because this is really cool. It does make for really clean code. But yeah, my concern is just how do we avoid all these problems that could come up. But yeah, if the library is put out there in the world and kind of bakes for a while and it figures out like, hey, no, everything's fine, then yeah, this could be really cool.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't have to rush with it. The only other thing to come out was the idea of actually being able to override the defaults as well. Someone was saying that they might want default animation duration there of 250 to apply to all touch behaviors across their application. But if that's not the default, then they have to write that everywhere.
Yeah.
My thought was whether we could slip this into the options when you register the toolkit, whether you could then define the defaults via that mechanism.
I mean,
but again, this becomes a point of we end up having to map lots of things, and dealing with extra effort there.
That's exactly
I don't know how beneficial that is.
Because yeah, I know that's the reason. That right there is the reason .NET MAUI decided not to have behaviors automatically inherit binding context from the view you attach them to is because you can reuse behaviors, you can assign them to different places. Certainly if you're using it for a style, that behavior will get used all over your entire app. And that's why they didn't want to automatically assign the binding context, because now you're going to have a control over here on a different page that'll have a binding context to a view model somewhere else, and that could cause memory leaks, and it's a whole crazy world that you can get into. So I don't know. I like this. It's cool. It's a cool idea. Gosh, the maintenance terrifies me. the Pandora's box that this could open. But yeah, certainly if somebody else wants to run with this and play around with it, I think this could easily become a recommended way to do behaviors in the future.
It's like a good pattern, isn't it?
Yeah, it just looks so clean.
It does indeed look very clean and fancy. It's like, I look at it, I'm like, yep, that's how I'd write it if I had 250 years.
Yeah, and I mean, Gerald had to drop, but yeah, Gerald, Kim, Matt, if you're still listening, heck, even Alan, next time you hang out on the Gone Mobile podcast, you could throw this idea over to John and the gang. But yeah, I could see, if .NET MAUI, the engineering team, wanted to move towards something like this, I would love that. I think that would make our life easy, make everybody's developers' lives easier. But yeah, I'm certainly hesitant to move forward with it in the toolkit, just given all of the crazy maintenance issues we could see, and just chasing one-off problems like we're already kind of doing with our collection view, touch behavior, binding context. So I think we'll leave it as discussion for now, but super cool idea. Gosh, that looks clean. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, that is it for the agenda. And like I said, Gerald had to run, which that's okay. He's been streaming live for 3 hours. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here since we're also over time. I'll say thanks everybody for joining. And anything else, James, Sean, Vlad, Kim, to chat about before we end the stream today?
I just want to say thank you for having me again, and I was excited to help out and be part of the community.
Yeah, thanks so much, James. And like we chatted about after the last stream, we'd certainly love to have you join the maintainer team. We'll do our yearly cycle. So we'll have the elections come up in August, and that's when we can have existing maintainers roll off if you want to. I hope you don't. I love all you guys. Hope you stay forever. But that's also when we can have new folks coming in. So yeah, hopefully we can get you on board, and that'd be incredible. Sean, Vlad, Kim, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Not for me.
No. Just have a good evening, everyone.
All right, well,
You too.
yeah, have a good evening, guys, and thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be here the first Thursday of every month at 12 p.m. Pacific. So hopefully we'll see you next month. Click subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode, and we'll talk to you then.